In the modern filmmaking landscape, sequels and remakes are a dime a dozen. Pick any popular IP from the 80s onward and flip a coin. Odds are 50-50 Hollywood has already tried to turn it into a franchise, or it's currently in the works. And at this point, we've kind of seen it all. Remakes that succeed in paying respect to the original while telling a new, interesting story, and those that just regurgitate their source material and end up feeling like cynical cash grabs. So when I heard the excitement for Godzilla Minus One, I kinda just rolled my eyes and assumed the worst. How could a decades-old franchise with more film entries than years I've been alive put out something fresh and original? Like, how many times can a big scaly lizard blow up Tokyo before people get tired of it? Well, surprisingly, the answer might be never, if done right. I'm happy to say my assumption was wrong. Minus One is an incredibly sincere and surprisingly emotional film that succeeds in making the destructive power of the King of Monsters entertaining despite the decades of prior screen presence. And that's what I want to tackle in this video. How exactly does this movie manage to be so captivating and original, while mostly reiterating the same Godzilla formula we've seen so many times? What cardinal sins does it avoid that most remakes commit, and what can we as audiences and creators learn and take away from its success? A common factor of unsuccessful remakes is they tend to try and one-up their original counterparts, often by substituting compelling and likable characters with bigger action set pieces and larger monsters. For example, in the first Star Wars movie, the Empire possesses the Death Star, a weapon that can destroy planets. So of course, in the sequel trilogy, the First Order resides on Starkiller Base, a station that has triple the planet-busting power and makes the Death Star look like a toy. By the time we reach Episode 9, the enemy faction has a fleet of ships all equipped with the power of destroying worlds.
Wow.
In the Jurassic Park sequels, nearly every film has a new dinosaur that is bigger and badder than the T-Rex, and on multiple occasions, they've even outright killed the T-Rex to make that point.
Tango down.
You can see this trend in the 2018 Predator reboot, the 2016 Independence Day resurgence, and so on and on. What these studios often fail to realize is that these iconic film monsters aren't great solely because of their designs or how big they are, but because they are featured in stories with great characters that we care about. And this is where Godzilla Minus One is especially strong. While Godzilla is massive and he's equipped with all new powers like a busted healing factor, those things aren't substitutes for good character work. Where some previous Godzilla films failed to make you care about the characters at all, Minus One gets you invested in its heroes almost immediately. In the first 5 minutes, our hero Shikishima, a kamikaze pilot, lands on an island far away from the conflict where he was supposed to give his life. Understanding his unfair situation, one mechanic, Takibana, hesitantly shares his approval of Shikishima's decision to choose life, despite such an act being considered highly dishonorable at the time. In just under a minute, the film has provided these people that you know next to nothing about enough humanity that it's genuinely tragic when Godzilla shows up and kills most of them in the very next scene. Like, as much as I love Godzilla, I really didn't want to see him do that to those poor people. This is a single example of how Minus One is set apart from the previous entries in the franchise. In past films, Godzilla's rampages are almost treated as pure spectacle. You didn't really feel all that bad for the people getting stepped on and burnt alive, because you were mostly there to have a good time watching a big lizard wreck everything around it. However, in Minus One, I actually wanted Godzilla to be stopped. I found it pretty damn sad when he nuked Tokyo. And I think a significant reason for that is the added attention the film pays towards the background characters. In most monster movies, the extras are there to just scream and get killed, but in Minus One, even the unnamed nobodies get enough time to feel like real people before they go. When Godzilla first walks into Tokyo, we see a news crew atop a building refusing to run away. They give their lives to broadcast the information of Godzilla's attack. Having these unnamed characters perform this small act of heroism adds a layer of humanity to something that would otherwise be pure spectacle. There's also the symbolic details, like the film telling us directly that some of the buildings that are getting destroyed survived the firebombing of World War II. It's like the symbol of this people's ability to endure and persevere getting crushed like it's nothing. It just adds a deeper meaning to the destruction. And of course, a large part of why you want Godzilla to be defeated is because you sympathize with the main hero Shikishima so much. Though most people probably can't relate to the trauma he goes through, it's tragic to see this character refuse to accept his role as a husband and father for his newfound family due to his survivor's guilt. And because he's such a charitable and kind person and you understand the shame he feels is wholly undeserved and you witness him battling against his trauma each night, you can't help but be strongly invested in seeing him live. And that's where the tension in this movie comes from, not as a result of some cheap gimmick like making Godzilla 5 times larger than we've ever seen him or whatever, but through carefully crafting a character you want to survive. If you really think about how the characters contributes to the success of Minus One, it becomes clear as to why some previous Godzilla films fell flat for a lot of people. Despite the fact that in Gareth Edwards' 2014 Godzilla, the titular monster is more massive than he'd ever been and his presentation is pretty damn awesome, I feel like the movie has been mostly forgotten now, and I believe that's because its characters are just kind of weak. Even though it has some big name actors, they're tied down by predictable stories that never allow you to be emotionally invested in them, which is why when I think of this movie now, what I mostly remember is the cool Godzilla moments, but not much else. I had totally forgotten that Elizabeth Olsen was even in this movie. If you make a movie with Elizabeth Olsen and I forget she was there, you've done something wrong. The second major reason I think Godzilla Minus One feels so fresh is the fact that it presents an original and subversive message. While Minus One stays true to the bones of the franchise, having a story centered around stopping a hulking monster from ravaging Japan, Minus One takes a page from the Predator reboot Prey and places the story in a brand new setting. See, a part of what makes Prey a successful remake is the fact that it's set in a time period we've never seen the Predator before. Getting to see people fighting against the Predator with archaic weapons is cool and gives the movie a story that has a message that's new to the franchise. In the same way, Minus One benefits by having the story set directly after World War II. This new time period allowed the writers to tackle many themes that are integral to the Godzilla franchise, like man's self-destructive nature and the power of people working together, all while providing commentary on warfare and conflict, which are things Godzilla films set in the modern setting don't as readily allow for. I honestly think the reason a lot of reboots fail is because they try too hard to stay completely true to their original film setting. Like, sometimes simply picking a new location and time period is enough to make something old feel new and worthwhile. And Minus One takes advantage of its time period to convey a message that subverts many popular tropes in films today. It's been a fairly common point in action films to have a character who has lived a life of crime or been on the wrong path to atone for their mistakes in their life's final act. The heroic self-sacrifice is a way for characters to prove their worth, their honor, strength of conviction, and love for their friends, family, and country. The trope is so popular that we even see it applauded in moments where it's ultimately unnecessary. Dying in a fiery blaze of glory is every action hero's dream, and a broadly romanticized concept in our culture. What I find so interesting is that Minus One argues that the notion of self-sacrifice being necessary for atonement is entirely false, and fighting to persevere, not fighting to the death, is the highest honor one can reach. Allow me to explain. In the film, after the end of World War II, Shikishima joins a deep-sea bomb removal crew for a source of income. One of his crewmates is Shiro Mizoshima, a young man who never joined the war and often expresses his regret at not having the chance to do so. I believe one of his first lines is something like, "If only the war had lasted longer." And at the end of the film, despite Shiro being someone who would be expected to give his life for his country, his veteran companions prevent him from participating in the battle against Godzilla. In a way, Shiro wanted to die in a blaze of glory, but his friends wouldn't allow it because, as they tell him, he should be proud he never had to serve. There is more honor in him getting to live than dying in combat. Shikishima's story further emphasizes this idea. He was a man who fled to Call of Duty, foregoing his pledge as a kamikaze pilot at the behest of his parents. When he returns home from the war, he stumbles into having a family, but something is still missing. He's still afflicted by his past, and it makes him unable to accept the good things he has found. After Noriko dies in the attack on Tokyo, Shikishima resolves that in order to atone for his cowardice on the island, he has to sacrifice himself against Godzilla. When Shikishima learns of his role in the battle, he insists that Tachibana, the only surviving technician from the start of the film, can work on his plane. Without explicitly acknowledging why, internally Shikishima thinks that with Tachibana's forgiveness, he can die at peace with his honor restored. But Tachibana takes it a step further and installs an injection seat into the plane, instructing Shikishima to use it. And with his blessing, Shikishima is able to accept the fact that he has been redeemed without needing to pay for it with his life. I feel like this is a pretty powerful and necessary message in our current day. In the past few years, hundreds of thousands of young men have died in conflicts all over the world, many believing their highest purpose was to give their lives for power-hungry leaders and apathetic governments that couldn't care less for their existence. While I don't think the message of Minus One is anything terribly revolutionary, I think it's good to have media that reinforces the idea that the lives of young men are more valuable than simply being disposable tools of war. And this is what the entire battle to defeat Godzilla is about. Throughout the entire movie, the notion that human life is cheap is reinforced time and time again. Shikishima is a kamikaze pilot expected to sacrifice himself for a doomed war. The crew of the deep-sea bomb removal vessel risks death at sea for a basic wage. The government does not warn the residents of Tokyo of Godzilla's arrival in fear of causing panic. So in the end, the civilians of Japan are able to prove to themselves that they are not disposable like their leaders have treated them, but that they can defend their country and defeat Godzilla without sacrificing any lives. And it's this added layer of meaning to the conflict that makes the story of Minus One feel new in a decades-old franchise. It's for these reasons that Godzilla Minus One feels so original and new. It has a compelling and emotionally charged story that isn't substituted for a bigger and badder monster. It has a message that stays in line with the franchise's roots while subverting modern film tropes, all the while not straying too far from the original Godzilla formula. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. See ya.